This is a 2003 Chrysler Concorde limited edition. The 3.5 high output. I'll be changing the timing belt on it at a 100,000 mile service interval. The first thing I need to do, I've already done, is take the bolts out of this front support bracket. This is the radiator mounts, upper ones. Take these long bolts out of the headlight, 2 of them, 10 millimeters out of the washer fluid and the cruise control, a couple of 13 millimeters out of corners on both sides, and pull the headlight out. And you can either unplug them or just leave the bulbs in the corners, it don't matter. 2 13 and a 10. And the long bolts out of the headlights. And you can either disconnect the hood latch. If you don't want a full adjustment, you can leave it on there and just lay the whole header panel off to the side. Just pick the cruise up. Walk your hood latch off. Went ahead and took the radiator support off. I've got the upper header off, one of the headlights out. Go ahead and remove the other headlight. Just kind of got to pull it out from around the skin. Get this big stud out from underneath the front bracket here. Went ahead and took a jack and raised the car up about a foot. Set a jack stand under it on the frame. Come down to the radiator and take the drain loose. Just kind of pull out. Set a drain pan underneath there to catch the antifreeze. It's going to come straight out through the lower radiator support. Let it drain. Take this upper radiator hose clamp off after the motor's cooled off and it's drained. Get the radiator hose out of the way. I took 4 bolts out of the fan, 2 on each side, and unplugged it. Over on the driver's side, has a plug-in. And I went ahead and took the upper transmission line off and capped it so dirt won't get into it. Just push it back out of the way and lay the plug-in out of the way. Take a 13 millimeter on the accessory belt pulley and back it off. Just back it off about 3/8 of an inch. Take a 15 millimeter and break the center nut loose on the pulley. Slip the belt off of there. And mark the direction on the belt if you're reusing it so it don't tear it up running the other direction. And while we're over here, may as well just take this whole pulley bracket off. There's 3 13 millimeter bolts in it. This is the back side of the pulley. That's the bolt to take loose first, the adjuster bolt. I went ahead and marked the position of the air conditioner accessory belt. This is abbreviation for crank and an arrow. Now the air conditioner adjuster pulley has a 13 millimeter, same as the other accessory driver belt pulley. Either go underneath with an extension and get it, or get it from up top here with a gear wrench or whatever. And back it off about 3/8 of an inch. Take a 15 millimeter and loosen that nut up. flip the belt on, throw it in the gob pile. And once you get the belts off, just have a look around. Look for problems like power steering return hoses getting gashes cut in them from running in line with the accessory belt. Have to deal with that. Now some of the stuff's starting to come off. Go over to the driver's side of the radiator and just wiggle it and pick up a little bit. Take that 5/16 bolt out of the auxiliary transmission cooler lines. It's got that clamp retaining lines to the radiator. Once you get the clamp off of the auxiliary transmission cooler lines, just kind of bend them over a little bit and get them out of those fingers they're sitting in on the radiator. I've set a drain pan underneath the driver's side of the radiator. I'm going to go ahead and take this lower transmission line off the radiator and take this clamp and move it back off of the lower radiator hose. There's going to be some drainage out of both of these, more than likely, so you want to catch it underneath the car, and it may spill across. Just have it ready to, a couple of drain pans under it to catch any running out. Most of it will head probably down this hole and then down underneath. I'm going to go ahead and do that. Now that all the lines are off of the radiator, I'll lean it forward. There's two 10mm bolts holding the condenser to the radiator, one on each side. I'll take those out, and the condenser slips up off the radiator through those arms. It's kind of retaining it on the top and the bottom. Okay, I slip the condenser out. It kind of wedges between these auxiliary lines and this pressure transducer, so watch and don't break it off. This one's already broke off. This car was in an accident. And just lift the radiator out. Now watch for spillage. Anytime this side of the radiator is down, it's got the cooler lines on it, it's going to leak transmission fluid and antifreeze out of this side. Once you get your radiator up, check for these rubber grommets stuck to the bottom of the radiator and put them back down into the lower radiator support. Big hole down there, one on each side, so you don't lose them. Now that the radiator's out of the way, you got a little room to work to get this dampener off. I'll be using an 18mm and impact to break this center crank bolt loose. If I didn't have an impact, I'd stick a bar in against this housing and let one of these spokes hit it to hold the motor from turning while I broke it loose. Went ahead and took the other transmission line loose from this auxiliary cooler and propped it up with a bungee cord. Just give me some more room to work on the dampener. Get the puller in there. Got the bolt out of the dampener. I'm going to be using a bolt that's about 4 inches long. And I'll get a little longer one if I need it to. And it's smaller diameter than the actual crank bolt. And I'll insert it back in the crankshaft until there's about half, 3/4 inch sticking out. And that's what the puller is going to rest against. And as it comes out, if it still isn't off, I'll just use this little bit longer bolt. mounted the puller on there. They actually got a regular Dodge puller. I'm just using a regular GM dampener puller and some skinny claws to get a hold of the inner spokes. I'll go ahead and pull this dampener off. The dampener is removed. I'm going to go ahead and take a 10mm and start taking these cover bolts out. There's two pieces down here, 3 bolts holding the lower piece on, and 113mm nut holding the engine puller bracket that's covering the timing cover. Get it out of the way. And remove these 10mm bolts out of this aluminum cover too on the driver's side camshaft. The timing cover is off, and it has a layer of sealant around it. Just make sure it's still intact, otherwise it'll have to be filled in. Not absolutely necessary, but keep debris and water out of it. This vehicle has 100,000 miles on it. Here's the timing mark on the passenger side sprocket. Timing mark on the driver's side sprocket, just a line. And here's the top dead center mark on the crank sprocket with a place on the crank sprocket. I'm going to go ahead and roll it around and put these lines between these two divots and the crank mark with the top dead center mark. Roll it around in a clockwise direction looking at it. Stick the crank bolt back in it with a spacer under it and rotate it around. Okay, the crank sprocket has a raised up pointer on the back of it. Got it on top dead center. And the driver's side sprockets in time between the two divots. And the cam sensor is picking it up, it's fine, but the passenger side was off a tooth. That's nice. So somebody's probably put a belt on it for, they just didn't know what they was doing. I'll remedy that situation soon. Yep. Yeah, it probably didn't have as much zip as it's supposed to have. I'll get it straightened up. This motor is possibly an interference engine, so anytime you've got the crank unlatched from the camshafts, do not rotate the cams or the crank separate from one another, because the valves can hit the pistons. And it's recommended not to take these bolts out of the camshafts. They're 8-10 inches long, and you got to have a special tool and a dial indicator on them one cylinder to set them back in time, because the end of the cam is D-shaped, and this sprocket will turn several degrees to set it actually one time. So I mean, unless you got a leaking cam seal and you seriously have to deal with it, I wouldn't fool with the camshaft sprockets. I'm going to go ahead and release the tensioner piston. It's got two 13mm on the bottom of it. Remove the tensioner plunger from its position in the housing. It takes two of those bolts. If you're reusing it, as long as there isn't a big puddle of oil in it. Probably should go ahead and put a new one in it, but if you're reusing it, put it in a vise and take 5 or 6 minutes and slowly compress this down till that hole in it is in line with the hole in the housing, and then shove a Allen head through to hold it down. You should take your time pushing this down over several minutes so you don't damage it inside, because it's got a real slow leak down. Or put a new one on it. You don't have to worry about resetting it. The new one will come with a pin in it. Now that the tensioner is out of it, the cranks unlatched from the camshafts. Do not disturb them. They stay put. I've put this one back in near the position where it's going to end up. I'll go ahead and change the water pump while I'm in here. I think maybe somebody should replace the water pump. That's how it got a tooth off, so I don't see a Chrysler emblem on it anywhere. And I'm going to take this pulley off and change it. I'm going to leave this hinge bolt alone because I've took them out before and it pulls the thread out of the oil pump housing. So I'll just be taking the bolt out of the pulley itself and changing the pulley. I don't feel like tapping this hole out and putting a helicoil in it. But this, sometimes it works, sometimes it don't, but I don't see the point in changing it. When you just change the pulley, the bolt, if it damages it, then you can fall back on this one. The only time I would even risk changing this arm is if the tensioner plunger has worn a big divot into the arm, but this looks alright. I'm going to go ahead and cover this crank sprocket up with some plastic and take these bolts out of the water pump. There's two different water pumps. This one has the 6 bolts on it. So it's something you'll have to know if you go to get a water pump for them. Go ahead and check for any oil leaks around the seals and the bottom around the crankshaft or anything. If necessary, put a puller on the timing sprocket on the crankshaft, threads into these 2 holes, and pull the sprocket off and change the seal in it. But if it's not leaking, I won't worry about it. I wrapped the crankshaft in plastic. Just took a little screwdriver and shoved it down behind the crank to keep the antifreeze off the crank sprocket. You take an air hose and blow out this housing, any loose trash and debris before the antifreeze gets all over it, so it won't be sticking to it, or brake cleaner or whatever. I'll go ahead and take these bolts out of this water pump. Keep in mind that all the bolts are the same size except the one top one on the corner on the passenger side is way longer than the other one. If you happen to be reusing a water pump, don't hit the pulley or anything with any objects. Work on the housing, but I'm putting a new water pump on it, so I'm going to tap it with a brass hammer anyway. I've left 2 bolts, one in the corner and one in the center on top to keep it from falling out. I've got the crank insulated from antifreeze. And it has a plastic impeller, and it's actually been scraping the back cover. You gotta watch for that. Check it for damage back there. Too much damage and it ain't gonna work. You have change this whole back cover if it's ground up too much. I went over the housing with some brake cleaner just to dry up some of the excess antifreeze and dirt particles. Clean any dirt from out of the water jacket area. And take a plastic scraper and scrape the residual gasket sealant off. You can clean up any dirty areas or anything with some 320 real light. Check for pitting on the cover surface. Everything's flat and clean. Check the fit of the new water pump. I'm going to go ahead and take the 15mm bolt out of this tensioner pulley. Stick a couple bolts in diagonal on your new water pump and just kind of center it in them and turn it. Make sure you don't feel any dragging, any scraping sound. If you do, you got a problem water pump that the impeller's not pressed on all the way. I don't hear anything on this one. Of course, the housing's already been skinned just a little bit. I don't think it'll affect it. We'll see. New ring will lay in this track on the back of the water pump. Since this is an aftermarket pump, it came with a regular round O-ring instead of a square one that was originally put in it. So, just for aesthetics, I'm going to tack 3 places with some weather strip adhesive on the edges of it. Make sure the O-ring stays put while I put it on there. It's not super critical. It'll probably will, but it's for everybody else that isn't as careful as I am. This limited amount of sealant you get on the flat cover area won't get any excess off of it. You don't want it displacing the height. And that'll help secure the O-ring. I'm going to put some antifreeze on the face of it so it'll settle on the cover without causing any problems. Some fresh coat of antifreeze on it. Mouse over the video and hit the circle I to continue to part 2 of the video.